Recently, the man who played a president on TV for the last 4 years vetoed a defense appropriations bill. Now, I believe we spend way too much money on defense in this country. As a matter of fact, we spend more on defense than the next 20 countries combined. That's more than Russia, France, England, China, India, and another 15 countries together. That's a lot of money. Far more than we spend on any other item in our yearly budget. The military-industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower warned us about 60 years ago is now a central part of our economy. This is a very serious problem. But that is not what I'm here to talk about today. The play president said he was vetoing the bill partially because it didn't address the issues surrounding social media that both people on the right and left are concerned about. While that issue is important, it has little to do with defense appropriations, and I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about traitors, and I'm here to talk about privilege, to talk about the other reason the Twitter president vetoed the bill. He opposed renaming the military bases that are currently named for Confederate officers. As I said, I'm here to talk about traitors. Let me share a little bit of history. In 1859, abolitionist John Brown and a small group of both African American and white comrades attacked the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, to gain arms for a slave revolt they hoped would take place. President Buchanan sent his best general to attack Brown and his company and arrest them for taking up arms against our United States government. General Robert E. Lee, assisted by Major Jeb Stuart, led troops that killed 10 of Brown's men and captured 7, including Brown. All of them were tried and executed. Within a year and a half, Robert E. Lee took the leadership of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia and proceeded to be responsible for the death of tens of thousands of American citizens over the next 4 years, as he and every other Confederate leader took up arms against our government and our people, all committing treason by the same standards that hanged Brown and his comrades. Yet virtually all of these men were pardoned. Lee became president of Washington University, which was later renamed in his honor as Washington and Lee University. Hundreds of monuments were built, and hundreds of streets, buildings, schools, and military bases were named for these traitors across our country. And most of those monuments have stood until recently. Now, one might ask how this could happen when these men, as traitors, deserved prison or worse. The answer is sad and infuriating, but also easy. Racism, white supremacy, and white privilege. Since 1619, when the first African people were brought as slaves to these shores, the white culture has had to find a way to justify the unjustifiable. How do you rationalize or justify imprisoning people and their children and their children's children? How do you rationalize or justify buying and selling them as property? How do you rationalize or justify forcing them into back-breaking labor from sunrise to sunset, using torture to bend their will to your desires? You have to sell yourself and everyone else on the crazy idea that somehow these folks are inherently less. They are somehow inferior to you. They don't have the same value. They don't deserve the same courtesy or treatment as your own people, white people. By the end of the Civil War in 1865, we'd endured over 200 years of this abomination, and over 200 years of this indoctrination of racist philosophy. Though the majority of people in the North were against slavery, and the majority of people in the South had never owned a slave, most of the white American culture had thoroughly internalized the racism used to rationalize slavery. So though there was support for an end to slavery and the guarantee of some basic rights for African Americans, social, political, and economic barriers remained everywhere. And there was no large movement to prevent the reinstitution of the Southern power system through massive violence and intimidation. Along with this came the celebration of the Southern white heroes, including former General Nathan Bedford Forrest, a founder of the Ku Klux Klan and commander of the massacre of surrendered African American troops and their white officers at the Battle of Fort Pillow. Monuments were built to Forrest, and schools were named after him. Confederate leaders were celebrated. Historians pushed the idea that the war wasn't even about slavery, depicting it as a family quarrel between white American brothers at the North and South. Military bases, as they were created throughout the South, were named for local Confederate heroes as our culture suffered from amnesia regarding the actions of these traitors. So here we are now. Our Congress, with all its shortcomings, listened to the people and passed a bill that ordered the renaming of those military bases named for traitors. The fake president vetoed it, and in one of the last acts of that Congress, they voted to override his veto. It's way, way late, but it had to be done. And now they've done it. This is River Smith with a comment for Liberation Brew and Satyagraha